Hello, and welcome to this overview of Kentucky death certificates and their use in genealogy research. Since we're all stuck at home right now, we are going to be taking a closer look at different Kentucky resources and how to access them from home. So, birth and death certificates didn't exist in Kentucky until 1911 when the state finally passed the Kentucky Vital Statistics Law in 1910. However, some death records did exist before 1911, it just wasn't state law. State law also dictates a 50-year delay before they are released as public record. So Kentucky deaths within the last 50 years will require a request and a fee to the Department of Vital Statistics. All right, so we're just going to jump in now. For the purposes of this demo, I chose the 1940 death certificate of Madame Belle Breezing. Some of you may be familiar with this name. If you look at the name on the death certificate, you will see that the name listed is Belle Kenny, from Belle's marriage to James Kenny in 1875. Like a lot of genealogical records, death certificates contain both primary and secondary information. So let's start with the primary information. For death certificates, it's the information directly related to the actual death. The first piece is when and where the death took place. As you can see, the death information right up here in the upper left-hand corner matches the usual residence of the deceased. So she died at home in the early hours of August 11th, 1940. Primary information also includes the primary and secondary causes of death, including a notation as to whether or not an autopsy was performed down below. Here, the primary and secondary causes are listed as uterine cancer. The doctor's signature is listed below that. Here it's dated 2 days later, after determining there was no autopsy or operation performed. And the last piece of information over here in the corner is the burial information, including the type of burial and the funeral home that handled the proceedings. For Belle Breezing, the Baker Funeral Home in Lexington handled her burial at Calvary Cemetery. I did cheat slightly with this since the funeral home name is partially illegible, and so I checked the Lexington Cross Directory to find the names of active funeral homes during that time period to match it to determine what the name actually was. But that's it for the primary information. The rest of a death certificate does not qualify as a primary source. If you're going to use a death certificate for proof, the strongest parts of it are only the primary sources. That's because most of the rest of the information is not happening in the moment and relies upon a very important individual to identify, the informant, which is listed here. This informant can be anyone. It's often a spouse, sibling, or the child of the deceased, but it can be a friend, a neighbor, or the person themselves providing information previously. Each piece of other information in a death certificate should be cross-checked with other sources if at all possible. I've seen many death certificates with incorrect information. There's possibility of transcription error, language or accent barriers. People lie, especially about their ages. Also, name spelling is really variable in these records. For this particular death certificate, the informant is listed as records, which doesn't really tell us much about who was giving the original information. So let's walk through the other types of information on here. In the upper right, we have the place of residence. Sometimes you'll just see a notation of same or something like that if the person died at home. Sex, race, and marital status. The certificate lists F for female, W for white, and widowed for marital status. Birth date and location, and age at death. As you can see here, Belle Breezing's birth date simply lists about 80 and her birthplace of Kentucky. Estimates are not uncommon, especially for earlier certificates. Parents' names right here. This only lists her father's surname as McMeekin and a first name of Sarah for her mother with no other information. Underneath the name here, we have military service, which here is unsurprisingly blank. Occupation and status underneath are also unsurprisingly blank. And also, if they have a social security number, that might also be listed on the death certificate, which can be useful if you're checking the Social Security Death Index. So check all of these pieces against other records if you at all can. So one of the overlooked areas on the death certificate that I do want to draw attention to today is sort of a secret code. Well, it's not secret. There is a number that you should see written on all death certificates, usually in the box for the cause of death. This is the Icd Code, which stands for International Classification of Diseases, which has been around since the late 1800s. Now, the causes of death should be listed on the certificate. However, the codes are sometimes worth checking, and the codes are still in use today. They do get revised periodically. So if you go online and you Google historic Icd codes, you can find articles about how to use them to identify more information. You can also find the actual lists themselves. And this might be sometimes a way of expanding your knowledge about the cause of death, or sometimes if the cause of death is illegible, then this might be the only way that you can figure it out. Okay, so let's look at Belle Breezing's death certificate on here. This is the screen in Ancestry showing it, the image viewer. So this is kind of hard to read. If I had to guess, I would say it's written in probably pencil. So I'm going to cheat slightly over here on the right hand side. There's a bunch of tool options, and one of the options that you can do is to invert the colors. And this can be really useful when you're trying to read faint handwriting or really have something pop out. So the number here is 48 something. So now, if we pop over to the Icd list, we need to find the revision that would have been in place in 1940. Here we go, and then we'll scroll down to 48. So here we have two options, 48, A or B, and if we pop back over, that looks like a lowercase b. So it means that the cause of death on there is other or unspecified cancer of the uterus, which matches what we already saw on the death certificate itself. So there we have sort of all of the different pieces of a death certificate as you're using it. So kind of let me walk you through how to actually get to these records. If you need more specific instructions for getting into the library's Ancestry account, please check out our video on the library's YouTube page on how to log into Ancestry Library Edition for free. So I'm going to go in. I've already logged in with my card number. So when I go to find a death certificate, Belle Breezing, and this is how she's listed in city directories. Here I see a directory listing, and I'm going to limit it to the death options. And I'm finding her Find a Grave Index results, but I'm not finding any death certificates. So this is where you can use Ancestry's advanced search. Since at this time I don't know a last name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to find the actual database. There's two here, the death records and death index. The death index goes longer, but the images themselves of Kentucky death certificates are in the Kentucky Death Records database. And the nice thing about using this is that you can omit pieces of information. For us, we know her death date is August 11th, 1940. And I'm going to put in just her first name. And here we go. She's actually the first one listed here, and you can go in and view the record itself. So if you have questions about using the library's databases, please contact us. You can go onto our homepage, and at the top there is an Ask tab, and you can submit specific genealogy and local history requests, or give us general email questions over here. We do fulfill information requests for people. However, we are not currently in our building, so we do not have any access to much of our collections. So we will get to questions as we can, but they may have to wait for a later date. But please feel free to contact us. We love hearing from people. And in the meantime, thank you very much, and I hope that you have very productive searching.